the harbor under sunshine in the morning. I got a press gang looking after me. I'll awaken sometime on the morrow, and by then we'll be a league away to sea. Full sails bouncing on the Friday. I sway about this way and windy to the day. Telling by the swells and adventures in the making. That's if we don't dive on the way. Well, I'm the boy that pressed the board and took me out to sea. The captain is a tyrant and he tells me what to do. But the first mate is a cutthroat with a mutineering spot. He plans to take the captain and beat him to the sharks. Get the press gang in the sunset in the morning. What the Navy did to me impressed me on the sea. I'm still alive and I've survived so many years later. As big a buccaneer as I could claim to be. Full sail bounding on the Friday. Jolly Roger's flapping with a score of 84s. Many pretty treasures, lots of booty to be taken. Cannon and the cutlass on a rebel man of war. Well, I was aboard the truncheon and they pressed me out to sea. And now I am the captain and I tell you what to do. My first mate is a cutthroat, a Tarzan on the stew. He plans to steal and get the king and beat him to the crew.
Hey fam, welcome to Punks for Progress. I'm Reverend Aaron. This here is New Leftist Questions with the Phoph. We are listening to The Real Mackenzies from their album Oot in a Boot. The song's called Cross the Ocean. Big ups to Paul Mackenzie. Way old school anti-racist action from Canada. And a band that incorporated bagpipes into their punk rock long before Dropkick Murphys did. But all that unimportant nonsense aside, I do have, waiting patiently over here, my cousin, the Phoph. Welcome, my cousin, the Phoph.
Hey, guys. What's going on, man?
Oh, I'm enjoying this Real Mackenzies a lot, which I don't know if you can hear very well on your end, but you're part Scottish. Actually, your side of the family that's Scottish is not the same side of the family that we're related on, but we both happen to be part Scottish. We're related on the Mexican end, but you're McGregor, and I'm Scott, but we're both Scottish. Anyway, I thought you'd appreciate the Real Mackenzies and be a fun way to open our discussion.
I like that one, man.
So you've got a few topics, 3 topics you want to discuss today. One, you've got through the first chapter of The Bread Book by Piotr Kropotkin. And you had a question about, well, we'll get into it, but I would frame it as basically notions of descriptive versus prescriptive. And I'm really anxious to have that discussion with you. And then lastly, there's something about Panera Bread or something that I know nothing about at all. And you had some questions or concerns in relation to that and its relationship to capitalism and socialism and stuff. So we have a few cool things to talk about. And just for anybody who doesn't know, it's called New Leftist Questions with the Phoph because my cuz over here is essentially a brand new leftist. He's read some Malatesta, he's reading the Bread Book, you've read Communist Manifesto and some other things, and some Chomsky, and are definitely sort of all in being an anti-capitalist, but as many know, leftism and anti-capitalism and socialism is a process. I like to say no one ever comes or becomes fully formed as a leftist. And so we have discussions here where my cuz gets to bounce off his thoughts and his progression as a leftist, and I do my best to sort of put it into some context or maybe kind of, sometimes I might even have answers to those questions. Who knows? But show him that Bread Book, cuz.
Are you talking about this Bread Book?
That Bread Book. The Conquest of Bread by Piotr Kropotkin. Now, I call him Piotr because... Oh, mine says Peter, too. I thought mine said... I have something around here. His name was actually spelled Pyotr. But a lot of these English versions will spell it Peter. But that's why I call him
no.
Piotr.
It's that thing. Don't confuse me.
Yeah, your book's spelt wrong, dude.
Get rid of that crap.
So you read the first chapter. I think the first chapter of the Bread Book is one of the most fluid, concise, and easily digestible critiques and explanations of how capitalism works that there is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You've read the Communist Manifesto, which is essentially that also, right? A description and critique of and condemnation of capitalism. But share with us, what are your thoughts on having now read the first chapter of the Bread Book, Cuz?
Well, first of all, in the preface of it, it explains a little bit about the ideas of socialism, the ideas of communism, attempts at having communes, revolutions that happened, the Napoleonic Wars, different ideas that just didn't at times didn't work. Most of the time, not because of the actual people, the socialists themselves, who had created successful communes, but they didn't succeed at the hands of the people who didn't want the communes to work and came in and made it bloody. This is something that anybody at my position probably is already going to know that those things did happen. But then it gets into the first chapter, and it starts to explain, very similar to the way a lot of other books have gone, is you have these wonderful machines that are being created. And you got to remember, this is late 18th or late 19th century, that most of this stuff is written, or early 20th century, right? So they're talking about these wonderful, beautiful machines, and how one of the biggest criticisms is the idea that they create these wonderful, beautiful machines who, at the beginning of time, when man could only produce so much, and usually that was only to provide for his family. Now we are at a day and age, it says now we're in a day and age, it was 100 years ago or so, but it says now we have these machines that can produce food, produce materials that we use for energy, all of these different things. But unfortunately, you got one person or a group of persons who owns those machines and says, nope, I get to decide what is done with these things that are being produced. You don't have any say. I want you to work for me, and I want you to, help make that machine produce all this stuff, but you have absolutely no say in what is done with those machines, what is done with those materials that are produced from the machines. And even the farmers who are toiling, and this is happening over so much nowadays.
And I'll just really quickly, I'll interject. And then he also will go into, like, how did the machines even come about? Like, he's going to trace back each different subsequent generation that contributed some form of technology that ultimately then gave rise to the inception of that machine, right? That the fucking dude who had enough capital to buy it had no participation in the development of whatsoever. But then he can then subjugate all of his workers because he had enough money to buy the machine. Made by workers. Each step of the way, each component of that machine has its own history of invention from some worker somewhere, right?
Yeah.
That just stood out to me. That
a little bit of a disconnect.
He sort of left no stone unturned in that process, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Right. Well, there's sometimes a little bit of a disconnect where people might think that we are criticizing a person for having an idea for a machine, that might be able to create these things. I don't have a problem personally with somebody having an idea for a machine that is going to be able to produce things that is available to all mankind. My problem is when that person now decides I have all the say and control over what happens with this machine, and all the people who helped me to build the machine have no say in what goes on with it, and the people who are helping to keep the machine running, the people who are gathering the resources created by this machine, you also have absolutely no say. I want you to do all the work, but you have no say in what you do with it. And what I was beginning to say was, um, people who may have seen things like Food Incorporated and stuff like that, there's ideas of these corporations. I don't think it's any secret that there's corporations that go to farmlands and force, you know, force farmers to get bought out. You know, they put pressures on them. They get the government to put more and more regulations on how you're running things, until the point to where you're near poverty. You have no choice. You have to give up a farm, or you're just going to lose it anyway. You know, and now, even though it's the land that you created something on, you once again, you have absolutely no say in how whatever you're producing is made. You're not getting the profit anymore from, the largest amount of profit. You're basically bought out, and it's, we do what we want now with your land, and that's it. We'll give you just enough to get by, though. And what's funny about that is most of those people don't end up with enough to get by.
Right.
They've got to figure something else out now.
Right.
And it goes back to, he talks about how a person, a man could work all of his life toiling away on a farm that is owned by somebody else, and spends his whole life in hard labor, doesn't even get to pass that on to his child as something that his child can now at least live well and eat well. Nope, it's a, hey kid, I'm so glad you're here because you're going to have to take over the toiling and labor to make somebody else.
Right, and then the father can teach the child the skills they need to then subjugate themselves to the boss, and then so on and so on and so on. And I point out the father teaching the son not to leave the women out of the equation, but it has historically been a patriarchal lineage, right? Like, it's these trades in the job place was mostly inhabited by men training their sons to then be wage slaves to the boss, while the daughter is expected to just get married and crank out babies or whatever. And all of this is,
well, we are.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we are still talking about the late 19th, early 20th century.
Right.
Some views might have been not what they are today, but and again, it was traditionally the man goes and works in the field, the woman takes care of everything at the house. That's the way it was. And I'm not saying we need to go back to that or anything. Right. I am in no way, shape, or form suggesting that any woman is not capable of the same exact things a man is capable of.
But we don't want women to have to be subjected to the same form of wage slavery that men have been. We want to see the emancipation of all genders and non-binaries, right?
Right. It was a little bit tough putting it down, but I mean, it was funny because you were specific about you wanted me to at least read the first chapter, and I read the first chapter, and I just wanted to keep going, but at the same time, I didn't want to lose focus on what the first chapter said, so I stopped. But this was a book that I was not ready to just put down.
Oh, for sure. And I should just say for our viewers that I actually had sent. Cousin and I were having a discussion about this basic kind of stuff, and I was like, oh man, the first chapter of the bread book, he would just love it. So I sent him a clip of an audiobook of it. And instead, he just went out and got the actual book, which big ups to you on that. I commend you on that, because the rest of the book is enjoyable too. And just maybe I should clarify, because we didn't in the beginning, that Piotr is an anarchist. He's not a communist. but he was a contemporary to Lenin. He was supportive of and critical of Lenin and of the Bolsheviks, and he was a towering figure of revolutionary socialism in Russia. And yeah, I just thought I mean, that little bit of context I think is helpful and necessary, and we just kind of didn't mention it at the beginning. But I think the relevance of that is I am of the impression that there is very little, if any, difference whatsoever in a communist or an anarchist goals. And when you start looking into the historic anarchists, you're going to find a lot of similarities in their philosophies and their theory with what we mostly associate with just being communism. I don't want to beleaguer that point too much. Maybe down the road, another show, we can really get into those dynamics. But it's just important if people are, happen to be new to Peter Kropotkin and the Bread Book to understand those dynamics. And I think that's a pretty decent basic introduction into the relationships that he had with them. But super, super fascinating history there, cuz. But anyway, like I said, I kind of went off on a weird little tangent there, but you went out, you got it, you've read the first chapter, and here's my question for you, cuz. How would you compare that first chapter to the 60 pages of the Communist Manifesto? Did you like one more than the other? Did you find differences? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, one of the things I like about Kropotkin is that he says things in a very matter-of-fact way, without embellishing on too much terminology that the average person is not going to be familiar with, and I like that. One of the things that when you're first reading the Communist Manifesto is you're looking at terminology you've never heard of before, and it interrupts the process of taking in what you're learning. And if you're smart enough, you're not just going to keep going thinking, well, maybe I get it. You're gonna look up a word or two, But even that kind of interrupts the process. And in here, even though he does use words like proletarian and stuff like that, these are most commonly he's using terminology that, as an average human being on the planet without a PhD, you're going to be able to read, you're going to be able to pick up, and it's not going to leave you stuck in confusion, wondering what it is that he was trying to say. It's very clear. Which is not something I'm capable of. I do a lot of but I really liked his idea of, at the very beginning, he talks about the trials and tribulations of humankind and how we have these very rudimentary tools that we had finally figured out how to make, and that we didn't have much to work with, but we did the best with what we had. And look at today. He gives examples of how far we have advanced beyond the days of the days of Solomon, the days of what is it? Gosh, hang on. It's like the 40 Nights, something like that. And even though we have progressed so far, even though we have figured out how to manipulate our surroundings and our environment in a way that is habitable and food producing and can create a sustainable life, what have we done with that? What we've done is we've created a world where the many work for the few, and the few are the ones that get the vast majority of the wealth and the profit from all of the work of the many, and those many often are only left with just enough to survive. And that's really kind of how the book starts, is look how far we'd advanced, but what have we done with it? It's again for me. I think probably because I've already adopted a leftist ideal, because I very clearly see the harm that capitalism is doing, not the potential for harm, the harm it is doing to the vast majority of human beings all across the planet. I can see that. It just I can see it very clearly, and again, it's a reiteration of capitalism bad, but it's another wonderful approach. It's another perspective, and I think the better understanding comes from getting all of these perspectives of it. It helps you to formulate your own perspective. You know what I mean?
Right. And I'll say too, like, it may seem, if you're a new leftist, it's like what we were actually making fun of this last week, I think, of, is it just another thing of capitalism bad? Yeah. And at some point you're going to move past needing these descriptions of the specific ways with which capitalism is so disgusting. But I think it's good to, especially early on, like where you were at, to internalize a few different descriptions of the ills of capitalism to build that sort of foundational base in your head, right? So you can sort of then kind of put that aside and then really start asking bigger questions, almost take for granted the base of that knowledge. And I always appreciate more than one source, man. Like, no diss to Marx and Engels, but like, I want to hear another perspective too. This is also a deeply socialist concept. Like, the more voices and the more contributing voices to this critique, the better it becomes. The more perspectives that we can bring into our understanding, the better we are, the richer our understanding becomes. But at some point, you don't want to read 10 different versions of why capitalism sucks. But really, I just suggest to any anarchist or communist, you got to read the manifesto and you got to read the bread book. And you can disregard portions of either one or whatever down the road, but at least get that base level of diverse perspective, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like what this does, there's two big things for me that it does for me. One is there are times where I read these books and they start answering questions that I might not even realize that I have. They start giving me a perspective that I hadn't thought of. I think that's probably more accurate to say, is I get perspectives that I hadn't thought of. I do believe it's irresponsible. I mean, dude, I would hark on anybody that just watches CNN to get their ideas of what's going on in the world, or Fox News. If you're just shut your cable off if that's all you're watching. But I think it's irresponsible to only get your views and ideas from one source. Just as like in a union or when you're in a committee or anything, it's not a dictatorship. You're wanting to hear the views and opinions of everybody who belongs and then decide what the best course of action is. Well, I'm hearing from the authorities, not the authoritarians. I'm hearing from the authorities on this. The fathers and mothers of socialism and anarchism and communism. I'm hearing when this was all first conceived, and the thing that blows my mind about it is that there is nothing that I've read that isn't 100% relevant to what's going on today.
Right.
And the second thing that it does for me is, I had a friend who watched last week's show, and there were a lot of critiques. And now this person is not a leftist, and they know that there's problems, but they're not, quite sold on a socialist answer or a leftist solution or anarchist. And I kept trying to explain to her, like, I don't feel qualified yet to try to talk you into becoming a leftist.
Good
And
for
I
you,
don't
cuz.
want to talk you into becoming a leftist. I would want you to find that course for yourself. But I don't feel qualified yet to try to recruit you, you know?
Yeah.
And it does go back to what you've told me time and time again of, instead of trying to tell everybody what the world under socialism is like, try to get them to see and understand what capitalism is doing now and why we need to change things. Um, it's a difficult bridge, um, uh, because the conversations always want to go straight towards, well, what do we do then?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's tough. Even Malatesta mentions, why are you looking at me for answers? If I were the kind of person to feel like I'm going to give you all the answers, then I'm going against everything I believe in.
Right. That's exactly right.
You know?
I'm curious.
We
This is a little off topic of what we said we were going to discuss today, but I am really curious. Like, can you give one example of sort of a question they came at you with, or criticism that sort of stumped you? Maybe I can.
Well, one of the ideas was, the basic general idea was, you really think people would actually live in a world where they're just doing things, for the benefit of society? Like, people aren't ready for that. And I'd actually said, you're right. Right now, people aren't ready for that. People have spent their whole lives learning, you work hard, you can have more things than that guy. Or you work hard and you get to live a good life. I'm trying to, why can't you just have a good life and work hard and have a true relationship with the job that you want to do? Not because if you don't do that job, you don't eat, you get kicked out of your home, but you're doing it because that's what you wanted to do. But the idea is always, it's tough again, but the big thing is, do you really think people are willing?
Okay, well, and I have an
do
answer
that?
to that. Is yes, absolutely they are. There's a fundamental flaw in this thinking, because first and foremost, one of the mantras we all stand by is, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Like, and that's a communist statement, and I, as an anarchist, I buy into that, and I'll go a step further, as I have no interest in trying to force other people to participate in my perceived anarcho-socialist utopia. They don't have to. Every single individual can sit on their ass and do jack nothing if they want to. I just have a little more respect and belief in humanity than that. I believe that if they properly understand that, like, look, the efforts that you make in order to facilitate your ability to function and survive in a healthy, productive way, as long as we structure it in such a way that it's not hurting others, and that we can actually structure it in such a way that it facilitates and helps others. But you only need to be concerned with yourself. It's not my job to worry about the rest of fucking humanity, man. It's not anybody's job. But we can set a base level understanding of, like, if we're still going to continue to labor, let's make sure that the people who are doing the labor are given the proper fucking compensation or respect, and or both respect for that, right? It's like, as opposed to just one person exploiting all of our labor. In our socialist utopia, if we actually there is no utopia. They will be totally flawed. Okay, I should say that. Because it'll involve humans, and we're a flawed species. There's flaws in the human condition, and there will be, and socialism isn't going to fix that. But we can set up a base foundation structure for society where we make sure we're not needlessly exploiting people for the benefit of a handful of people. If you're going to go out and you're going to labor, chances are that labor is going to benefit other people, and you should be treated with the respect that deserves.
Right.
It's not your job. You're not going out and laboring to make sure the whole society works, and it's your job to make sure everybody has it. No. Your responsibility is to make sure that you and yours are properly taken care of, but in such a way that it doesn't exploit others or leave others in the lurch, or at the same time facilitate one little, person's ability to laud power over others. Our current constructs makes all that inevitable. And so in that mindset, when we're so immersed in it still, it's very hard to envision something different. I assert that we would labor less and far more people will be wholeheartedly taken care of. I'm not taken care of because that implies someone doing it for you, but everyone's needs will be met and will have a much more fulfilled individual existence, right? Which organizes into a collective thing. But again, my main point being, you would never be look, if you want to be like, look, fuck all you fucking socialist, anarchist, communists in your weird way, and I don't want to help any of you. I'm going to sit at home and fucking just draw pictures about how much I hate y'all and do nothing else. Well, in my socialist future, they would have a roof over their head to do that in. They would have all the food that they need to do that in, and the clothes on their back, and all the resources they need to survive. And we'd give them paper and pens and paints to draw those pictures of us being really stupid and lame.
Yeah.
But I just think that, like, in the end, people are going to want to come out and participate in humanity, especially when we are repeatedly shown the mass benefits of it. And I'll kind of wrap up my thought on this by saying I just believe in the human spirit. I believe that we are instinctively a communal species. We thrive on working in congruence with others. There's a image that keeps popping in my head. There's I'm not even going to try and say their name because I always get it wrong. But they're Polynesian punk rock skinhead guys. They play in a ska band, and like they have a huge following in their home country. They play big stages, but they're regularly on the street busking. And I just watched a video of them recently where they got together with all their friends and they did a little scooter run, and they went and cleaned up some little village and like just did a bunch of work and had a bunch of fun and partied and rode their Vespas and then split and went and hung out together. And what I saw was all of these people just having a really fabulous time, and seeing the people in that village, how appreciative of they were of that effort. Like, that's humanity, cuz. To me, that's humanity. What capitalism does is trains us with a lot of fucking effort. I mean, the amount of effort that goes in to train us to go against our nature, to force us to be selfish and greedy. Like, that's not natural,
Yeah. And one of the criticisms, and I've heard this from a couple of people, and let me say the whole thing out first. The idea of helping the homeless, donating food, donating clothing, donating whatever we can, there's different programs that try to lend assistance, and then it gets to, but a lot of these people don't want help. And my answer has always been, how many homeless people have you spoken to and talked to? Because I venture to say millions of them. And I think I can't even speak on behalf of the homeless people, because in my job, I actually come into contact with quite a few homeless people, but I think, again, irresponsible for me to suggest that I know how to represent what their sentiments are when I've only spoken to a handful versus the millions. And so I've heard people say, Well, man, but they don't want help, and most of them prefer to be on the street. Most of them. That's my feeling is. So you've talked to most of the homeless people in the world, and most of the homeless people in the world say, "Nope, I'd rather live next to the creek," and that's
Right.
what I use
Yeah,
to urinate.
the guy that worked 40 years to build a life for himself at the same job, and had a mortgage, and did all that so that they could have a nice retirement, and then fucking has a medical condition at 65 that wipes them out financially, and they end up on the street. Yeah, that guy's like, yeah, this is what I want. I wanted this.
Yeah,
That's why I
yeah.
just worked for 45 years to buy a house that I just lost, and I'm fucking homeless now.
Right.
And
Well,
go ahead.
can I say real quick? Probably not real quick. Another idea that I have about that is people who work in some kind of program where they're trying to assist. Whether or not it's a halfway house or some kind of shelter or some kind of food donation program or some kind. Usually, it's referring to places that offer shelter, and then there's the idea of, well, these people, you try to give them assistance and they don't want it. And I do believe right now you have people who either probably need some kind of help, may have something going on where they were able to get the help they need, whether or not they have psychological concerns or drug habits. Things happen, and I don't believe that that's even like the mainstream. I think that there are people who had suffered under capitalism, had ended up on the street because of capitalism. So when you're trying to say, hey, we want you to rejoin society and be a part of this thing that put you on the street, yeah, I'm not surprised if there are people not wanting the assistance. I'm not surprised if there are people going, please leave me alone, leave me out of your fucked up, system. I'd rather be on the street than have to subject myself to hope, and just to be. Go ahead.
Well, and what's playing in my head is the memory of the it's been a long time, like 1995 or 96, something like that. The first time we did Food Not Bombs in Reno, we went to Wingfield Park for my Reno peeps. This was long before the River Walk was put in place and all that. Basically gentrification that went on in downtown. Prior to that, much of the houseless community would hang out in what was that version of Wingfield Park. And so that's where we and my ex-wife and others, made up a pot of vegetarian food and took it down there, and we're like, here you go. And to my surprise, the first time we did that, they didn't just run up to get their free food. In fact, their attitude was, all right, when's the fucking, when does the sermon come? Right? When are
What's
you
the
gonna,
catch?
Right. What's the catch? What are you going to require of me now? Basically, if it involves you telling me why I'm an evil piece of shit sinner or whatever it is and how you're going to save me from my evil ways, you can keep your fucking soup, yo. And thankfully, because Food Not Bombs is so righteously constructed, we were able to say, nothing. We just are here trying to make a point that we spend way too much money on bombing people when we can feed them for a fraction of it. And we're trying to put our beliefs into action. So if you want some, it's here. You can have it. You can tell us to fuck off. It's fine. But if you want it, she's a damn good cook, and I think you might like it. And then it was like, okay, cool. And we had a great time, and they were appreciative of, and we went back every week, and ended up putting out a record in benefit for it and whatever. The benefit for Reno Food Not Bombs 7-inch. And anyway, that's totally irrelevant. I guess that's just me kind of tooting my own horn that I put out a record.
Well, look.
But again, it's that it's not that we don't want your help. It's, all right, been down this fucking road before. What's attached to the help that you're going to give me? And if
Yeah.
you're on an ego project for you, fuck off, save your soup.
Right. And you know, there downtown where I live, there's a park. It's not a huge park, but it's where I'd say the majority of the downtown homeless people usually congregate there during the day. And then in the evening, what happens is they're told, okay, you got to leave. We're going to turn the sprinklers on because, you know, we don't want you in the park in the dark, which, you know, to me kind of sucks. But there is an organization that that feeds, that gives food on the weekends over there. And from what I can tell, there are no sermons. There are no there are no, not restrictions, but there are no requirements of the people who want to eat. It's just an organization who, you know, when they can, they go out there and, hey, here's some food. Take it or leave it, but here it is for you. And I think that's great because same thing where, like you were just saying, it's where's the catch, right? What do I have to accommodate, you know, out of my personal choices to accept food from you, you know? And that's the difference to where if you're offering assistance or shelter or a way to get back on your feet in society today, I can understand why somebody would be leery of the idea of putting themselves in the position, just, I've gotten back on my feet and here's somebody to sweep them out from under me again. No, thank you. Fuck you, fuck your society, fuck your capitalism, I'm done. And so when you go and you offer them a place, here's this place that you can stay in, and then we're going to help you to get a job, and then we're going to help you to, remember how to practice your personal hygiene, and if you have any other issues, we're going to get you the therapy or the help you need for that. And these people are going, Now, imagine that same person post-capitalism, and you've got this home, you've got this place, and you take that person and you go, check it out. You see that right there? That's your place to live in. You don't have to, and it's just, you can live there. There's nothing that you need to do to be able to live there, but we just want you to have shelter if you want it. If you don't want it, okay, we'll give it to somebody else, but here it is for you. And forevermore, there is never a threat of we're going to pull you out of that house, you know, just because you're not providing money or something. You know,
or
no, it's
didn't
just
pray
yours.
the right way, or, you know.
Yeah. Now, that person might be more inclined to live there. And if they choose not to, okay, you know. But yeah, I can see why people in today's under today's society that they're leery of going into something, you know, even when they're accepting what is called charity, which charity supposedly is just simply an act of giving without wanting anything in return. People are leery of that because half of the time it seems like there's a catch. Now, I imagine that same person where I don't expect that capitalism ends and we take people and we say, here, you can live here, no strings attached, that everybody's going to be right on board right away. People are going to be leery. It's going to take a while for people to trust that it's actually just, here you go, you have a place. That's going to take a while. It's not going to happen immediately. But I would rather offer that to somebody than here's this with stipulations.
Right.
You know, I think as a human being, being able to have shelter shouldn't come with stipulations.
I totally agree with that.
And what's that?
I totally agree with that deeply. I mean, it's one of the fundamental things that has driven me most of my life. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to get into too much detail about it, but my father and my family, we took people in our home. We had 60, 80 people and shit living with us.
Yeah.
My dad was evangelical, and there was, a religious structure that was required. And I have deep criticisms of our methodology in that way at that time. I would never subject people to that. It's like we talk often about like no desire to win people over to socialism or put the effort to try and win them over. I just want to put in place functioning, positive, beneficial mechanisms that make people go, oh, that's how that works?
Yeah.
Oh, that's all we'd have
Yeah.
to. Oh, okay. I'll do that. Can I be a part of that? Absolutely. Come on.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, do you mind if I read something?
I don't mind if you read something. Are you
I know,
moving
and
on to?
I'm not going to spend too much time reading because I know reading, just sitting here watching somebody read, can get a little dry. And I swear to God, well, yeah. I'm not going to constantly only refer to Malatesta when I'm speaking. It's just, this was one of the more recent things.
Well,
I
I'm just
read.
going to say no. You're probably actually going to reference him a lot more, especially when your copy of Method of Freedom comes in and you start reading that, because that's going to blow your
Right.
shit out of your whatever and whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
So I'm going to read this real quick, and I want to just kind of see what, you've already heard it. You didn't read it. You heard it on
I audio booked it.
Yeah. But so it says, a society without a government, which would act by free, voluntary cooperation, trusting entirely to the spontaneous action of those interested, and founded altogether on solidarity and sympathy, is certainly, they say, a very beautiful ideal, but like all ideals, it is a castle in the air. We find ourselves placed in a human society which has always been divided into oppressors and oppressed. And if the former are full of the spirit of domination and have all the vices of tyrants, the latter are corrupted by servility and have those still worse vices which are the result of enslavement. The sentiment of solidarity is far from being dominant in man at the present day, and if it is true that the different classes of men are becoming more and more unanimous among themselves, it is nonetheless true that that which is most conspicuous and impresses itself most on human character today is the struggle for existence. It is a fact that each fights daily against everyone else, and competition presses upon all, workmen and masters, causing every man to become a wolf towards every other man. One, I don't come close to weeping when I read often, but
No, that was beautiful. Yeah.
Dude, for one, I love the idea that he tackles, which I've kind of tried to find my own words for, is that idea of that ideal. I would say, I'm not going to speak for every leftist. That's not my job. I'm not going to speak for every anything. But do I see myself as an idealist? Yeah. I have an idea of what this world could be and what we can be for one another. And I don't care what the likelihood of it coming to fruition is. I don't care if there's a 0.00001 chance of success that we can actually work in solidarity only with the idea of us working towards the betterment of humanity and working towards society. I'm still going to go for that. I'm still going to shoot for that. I don't care how little the chance is. I do see myself as an idealist. And I love that he suggests, it's like, to most people, it's a castle in the air. It's like, come on, we're really all going to work together. You really think everybody's like that? And my answer is no, nope. I don't think everybody's like that. And I think that the vast majority of the people who aren't like that don't even realize that they're the ones being oppressed, that they're the ones being pitched against one another in a battle for work, in a battle for goods, in a battle for everything that they need to survive. because the capitalists, the ones who are making all the money off of everybody else's work, have put people in a position to where they have to combat one another financially for survival. You know, and so I guess that's the first goal is, and it's so weird when you talk to, for me, when any individual I talk to will admit that there are big issues with government, that they don't feel the government represents them. They will admit that the government is corrupted, by capitalism, or well, they don't want to say by capitalism, but they want to admit that government officials are corrupted by money. And I keep wondering, okay, well, where do you think the money comes from? You know, uh, and they will even agree that there is a problem when there are hundreds of thousands, millions of people either homeless or living in poverty or barely struggling just to survive. But yet they can't make that direct correlation between what's going on and capitalism being the culprit. And I don't get it.
Well, because people don't understand what capitalism is. I remember being young and being, well, I go to work and I make money and I like having money and paying my bills. I guess I'm a capitalist. And I've heard many, many people say that. We laugh, but I think the average person kind of says, you hear I've heard so many people say, well, I'm a capitalist. And my response to them is, oh yeah, where's your factory? How many workers are you exploiting? You're not a capitalist. You're a worker under capitalism. You have been trained your whole life to be in competition. And we're also taught through our sports mechanisms and stuff that healthy competition. Da, 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 da. Now, I don't think in a post-capitalist society we have to do away with competitive sports. Don't misunderstand me. But we put such a deep emphasis on butting up against each other. And we've sort of, the capitalists, the bosses have sold us this narrative that that's the only way for us to progress and to innovate and to advance is through that butting of heads, through that friction. And I'm just going, what if we stopped with all the friction and just worked together instead?
Right. Well,
and I don't have to resent you, and I don't have to be in paranoia of you, and your win becomes my win, and my win becomes your win. Why are we fighting against each other? Oh, because the more we're preoccupied with being in competition with the other, the less we're going, hey, that boss dude ain't competing with any of us.
Yeah.
And he's doing great, Anyway, go ahead.
Well, sorry, if you want to finish, go ahead, man.
No, I'm done.
Well, I got a friend of mine who he did own a business. And it was a small construction business. And I would refer to him more as petit bourgeois than anything.
Right.
I would let you explain petit bourgeois to people who might not know what
that's
that
basically,
is.
You just nailed it. It's you're not necessarily working class. You have a base level of wealth. You might even have a little power over some people, but you're not a full-on capitalist exploiting like hundreds of people at a time. And
Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos is not petit bourgeois. He's full-on the worst example.
Right. He's full-on capitalist.
And
listen,
a lot of academia is petit bourgeois. And here's the thing, and petit bourgeois can go either way. They can be excellent allies to us, but they can be our worst enemy. And the reason that petit bourgeois, we have to be wary of them is because they have so much to lose. More often than not, the petit bourgeois in times of crisis have ended up siding with the fascists. It was the petit bourgeois siding with Franco that facilitated his ability to subjugate the masses of Spain. It was the petit bourgeois that ultimately saw their land and their small holdings under threat and ended up aligning with Mussolini. Okay, and it was a lot of the petite bourgeois that ended up aligning even with Hitler. Not all, because they have less to lose than the capitalist ruling class. But they've
got more to lose
than we do.
Than the proletariat.
That's right. So that's a basic idea of what petite bourgeois is. So I would say your friend easily matches the designation of petite bourgeois or petty bourgeois. Go ahead.
Right. You know what I realized I was just doing? I'm leaning forward as if I'm leaning into my mic, but my mic's just hanging here, so I'm not actually like leaning forward. Somehow makes me feel like I'm going to be heard louder. I don't know.
Well, the phrase is, cuz, lean in. That means you're getting, now you're really interested.
Right.
So thanks for leaning into what I was saying, cuz I appreciate it.
I was enthralled.
Liar.
Anyway, so my buddy, he talks about when he had his business. Now, it didn't succeed. He ended up having to sell the business, or his part of the business to his co-owners. And now he's working back with me at my job, which he had retired early from to go and start this business. And now he's back. And he talks about how he refers to himself. He's like, I'm a capitalist, right? And then he'll go on to talk about his business, and he'll talk about how, but he wasn't just sitting in an office not doing anything. He worked alongside of his employees, right. And he tried to make sure that the wage was fair, and that they had good health care, and they had good this and good that. And he was always very he had an ear for any time hey boss, I need to do this or I need to do that, and he would
that's why he didn't succeed, cuz that's why his business failed. He gave a shit about his employees. Sounds like he's a pretty decent dude who gave a shit about his employees. And you have to be cold and heartless and be totally down to fuck over and exploit anybody and everybody that works for you if you want to be successful. I stand by that wholeheartedly. Anyone that's ever, by their bootstraps, become an incredibly wealthy fucking business owner, fucked over people and exploited people and treated them like shit and left them in the suffering lurch. It sounds like the guy that probably a little too decent of a guy to have done that to people. So,
and that's right. That's actually what I tell him. I'm like, well, that's why you don't have a business anymore, is because you seem to actually care about people. And if you're going to be a true capitalist, really make that money, you can't. But I also try to explain to him, you realize you're telling me that you're a capitalist, but I hate to break this to you, but you're not. Dude, you work with me at my job, and we just work all day long to make enough money to survive. You're doing Uber or Lyft or whatever on the side, even though you're working a job in public transportation for 8 to 10 hours a day. You're also, doing another job on the side just to get by. I'm sorry, man, you're the proletariat. You're the worker. You're not the capitalist, man. Because if you were the capitalist, you wouldn't even know I exist. You'd probably be in, Honolulu right now, laughing about, like that. Look at that guy brought me his drink. Look at the clothes he's wearing, stupid. So, and I'm not saying all capitalists are like that, but you are. But, I think there's like a disconnect where people will say, and I was glad that you had said it, that people will claim to be capitalists, and I think there's a difference between actually being a capitalist and supporting capitalism.
Right.
And if you're supporting capitalism but you're not a capitalist, you don't even realize that you're the one being exploited. And some point, it's how do we get these people to see that they're the ones being exploited? Do you have to hit rock bottom and be near homelessness to realize that there's a flaw in the system?
There's all, that's a good question, cuz, and that is sort of the ongoing question. It's the $1 million question, right? Or the lack of capitalist question, I guess. Everyone has their different threshold, there is clearly no one-size-fits-all answer to that. You know, early on, in the earliest formations of the socialist project, like during the times of the First International, when Marx was around, when Bakunin was around, when, these people were alive and kicking, the general consensus really was, and there was a lot of debate over this, but the sort of prevailing wisdom was that it's going to be sort of members of the petite bourgeois, the intelligentsia, people who are educated properly to the ills of capitalism and the way it exploits people, that would initiate the revolution because they understand, right? Seems to make basic logic, right? It feels pretty fluid. But what they actually found is that was not true. That it was actually amongst some of the least educated and the poorest and the most fucking miserably oppressed that finally just said, I can't take these bonds anymore, and rose up and broke shit. They didn't know that there's a bourgeois and a proletariat, and they don't understand, and they don't have they haven't had access to the base information that helps them understand the nature of capitalist exploitation. They just know they're being exploited and can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
This is where notions of the vanguard become important, because to take, say, a phenomena like the uprisings in response to the murder of George Floyd, that if we had a proper leftist foundation in here, in this country and in the West, that could function as a leading vanguard, but those very, very astute and well-educated revolutionaries were working directly in tandem with the most oppressed people in this country, facilitating their knowledge on directly platforming and hearing the issues that relate to those most poor and oppressed peoples, basically putting their voice up front. I mean, that's the role of the vanguard, not to be in charge of everything and to tell, the workers how to revolt properly. It's about being in perfect concert with them, that they can then take something like those George Floyd uprisings and turn it into a real revolution, right?
Okay.
But, I there's plenty of anarchists I know that would take issue with what I just said, and I hear you, and it's a lot more nuanced than that. But the main point I think that I want to get across is this notion that anarchists and communists alike, early on in our project, believed that the revolution would be fomented by more educated, petite bourgeois or managerial class people. And it just isn't true. The Bolsheviks, the workers rose up, and then the Bolsheviks turned that into their revolution, right? For lack of a much more nuanced description. So this gets to your question, I think, Cuz, about how do we teach people to rise up and hate capitalism? Well, you can't. I just think you can't. I mean, you might reach some people, but all the time you're out there putting all this effort into trying to win over these few people. You could have just been building some type of effective socialist project that helps people. Right.
Okay. And that was something that had been asked in that recent conversation I'd had was, okay, well, talk is great, but what are you actually doing? And you've said, find, it doesn't even have to be a leftist organization in your community. Volunteering in some way that helps benefit those around you, that's a definite step in the right direction. We can't just sit here and talk. You have to do.
Right.
You have to take actions. Because you and I could have these great conversations forever that either fall on deaf ears or don't fall on any ears. going out and doing actions that create a positive environment, that's going to speak volumes, you know.
And
But I do think it's important. Well, I do think this is also important. I think that there are going to be people who have questions, and those people might go and stumble across or decide to volunteer at something, and then be like, you know what, I like this. You know, how do I find out how we do more of this? You know, and they may end up, whether they're on this channel or something that speaks in a positive way towards the betterment of society and treating each other, uh, you know, like human beings, you know, with respect. Um, I think that's something that can end up becoming a positive result of going out and volunteering and trying to create something positive.
I totally agree. And I'll tell you that's what, look, I've always been a very outspoken person since I was really young. It's one of the reasons I became a punk rocker, because I saw injustice and wanted to fucking scream about it. So I've always had a microphone in one way or another. I really have. But
Yeah.
Punks for Progress, I think by the second season, the first season it was me and Punker Mike just trying to figure out what to talk about. You know,
Yeah.
but it really became important. Like, it dawned on me, or became increasingly more obvious, that my experience in the street is probably what I should be talking about. I've more so in recent years, but my whole life I've been in one way or another involved in some type of organizing. Okay, whether it's just promoting punk rock shows and organizing events like that, or it's doing Food Not Bombs, or, you know, working with my dad at our the ministry he ran, organizing anti-fascist actions, and helping to organize BLM marches and stuff. It was the interactions and the lessons I learned with my comrades in the midst of those efforts that informed my narratives here. It's also one of the reasons why I feel confident in telling other people they should go do those things, because I'm not just talking out my ass on a microphone about going out and do it. I do those things, so I feel like, if anything, I have a basic right to suggest other people maybe try some of what I've tried. But the reason I want to express that to people is because I can read the theory all day and I can read the history all day. But especially when I started taking to the streets to organize against fascism, is when all of that theory just became hardcore reality, like glaring, bright, shining lights of reality. Like, wow, this is exactly what they were talking about. This is exactly what Malatesta was telling me reactionaries would do. This is what Marx was saying the capitalist ruling class would do. This is it, what I'm seeing on the street right now. And then I was out there organizing with other people who had studied the theory, who had studied the history and understood the context with what we're seeing contemporaneously. And then we had conversations. We would have debriefs with each other after our various actions, which I think evolved my leftism in ways that are almost incalculable, right? Like, so it's not about, none of that is me going out and trying to convince someone to be a leftist or be an anarchist or a communist or a revolutionary, right?
It's just speaking out against the injustices that are going on.
And then speaking
Right?
from, yes, and then speaking from the experience of actually trying to do something about it. This is where I have, I take issue with some new leftists who have read a lot and really know their history and their dates and their names, and they can quote passages and stuff, but they've never been to the street. A lot of times these leftists are offering up all kinds of theories about praxis and tactic and stuff that I'm just going, and I'm watching them make videos about it, and I'm going, oh my God, like, I know a number of people have tried that and it was a disaster. And if you'd ever been organizing and working with other anti-capitalists, you would know that too. And guess what? I can't tell them, dude, what you're saying is going to be a disaster. Because then they're going to be like, well, why are you shitting on me? Where's your solidarity? What, you're not going to support me trying to come up with ideas? And it's like, and I don't want to have that conversation either. I'd rather just work with people that are trying to do something a little more. And
Okay.
And I would
Okay,
say
so-
that lastly, my last thought on this is I want to push back a little bit on what you said. I don't want to discourage people from volunteering with whatever is available to them and to volunteer. And if the only type of situation you can volunteer in happens to not be fundamentally anti-capitalist, then okay. But I just want to assert that if you're able, make a little extra effort, I guess, and try and find something that is anti-capitalist, because putting your theory and praxis into action with other anti-capitalists, the dialogue between you two is exponentially more fruitful. Okay?
Okay.
So does that make sense? Like, that's not to
It does.
disparage anyone that's trying, because I say at the end of every one of my videos, much love, thanks, and appreciation to anybody and everybody who gets up and out in an effort to make life easier for other people. And I don't put in that anti-capitalist, socialist, anarchist, because I do respect people who make any type of little extra effort. Most of us sit on our ass and do nothing but complain, right? I just wanted to thank you for indulging me on that, but I just think it's really important to emphasize, if you can, volunteer with another anti-capitalist or other anti-capitalists. But you had a thought, cuz. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know we're probably running a little bit long. I wanted to get to the last topic, if you're cool with it.
Of course.
And this is something that again, a coworker. I'm not really going to say a friend. I get along with almost everybody. This guy's a little bit tough because he wants to walk in each day and have a conversation with nobody or whoever will listen about how dumb liberalism is, how dumb leftism is, how dumb socialism is, and he's having those conversations just kind of as he's just kind of traipsing through the room, and then hoping somebody will catch his eye so he can now gravitate towards them, and indulge further in his
regurgitation of his brainwashing.
Yeah. So this guy, he had brought up, and this was a while back, this was about a year ago or so, he had brought up something about the Panera Bread experiment. And I had no idea what he was talking about. Like, Panera Bread, I think that's a bread company. I'm not real up to date in all my bread companies. So it's like, okay, is that a big company? I don't know. And then he wanted to talk to me about how they had an experiment. And I think he even kind of got it wrong. He was saying, yeah, they were offering free bread to people, as an experiment.
This does sound vaguely familiar. I remember some type of like the right wing being all up in arms. Something about Panera. Something about this sounds familiar to me, because I don't. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead.
No, it's fine, man. He didn't really get it quite right after I read about it. He was talking about it's basically like Panera offered free bread to people. Just to see if people would take advantage of that or not, or would people just get their fair share. And of course, there were people that just grabbed all of it, like people showed up in trucks to load it up. And he was like, see, there's no way, man. So as soon as it got work, and I told him, even at that time, that was a year ago, I hadn't even read the Communist Manifesto. I hadn't read shit. But long before I started reading, long before you came up with the Punks for Progress channel, I already had my own issues as well with the way the world was going. But a year ago, I was starting to get more and more discontented. And I told him at the time, look, this sounds like a project that was set up to fail. Like it was designed to fail. Because you can't offer somebody you can't offer somebody all these things and say, hey, look, for a limited time only, this stuff's going to be free. Now everybody only get your fair share.
Well, because look, I know you're going to get into more details of it, but let me just say really quick, like, capitalism still exists after Panera gave away free bread. Okay? So
exactly.
The precarious situation of those people, like if you are going to Panera to get free bread, it's because you're struggling. It's because you really need that bread. And guess what? Once Panera stops giving away free bread, you're still going to be in that desperate situation that capitalism created for you. So, like,
right.
To me, it's a I'm definitely want to hear more details in your explanation. But to me, all I'm hearing is a deep, deep fucking condemnation of capitalism.
Well,
Like,
and
it
that's the
is
thing
not an
is
example of some fucking inherent selfish flaw within the human condition. Capitalism has made
right.
them desperate, so much so that they'll take an exorbitant amount of free bread and leave other people unable to get bread because they know tomorrow capitalism is going to be oppressing me again.
Right. And add to that, we even know that when things are for sale, that when they say, you can get this for a limited time only at this price, that creates anxieties in people. It creates the anxiety that makes you feel like, well, I better get that thing that I didn't realize that I want. I better get that now because later on, that thing that I didn't know I wanted and probably don't need is going to be more expensive. If you tell people you can have this thing for free, but only for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, I don't care. If there's a time limit on when you can get it for free, it's set up to fail. You're not going to see an example of people only coming to want to get their fair share. You're going to see people who are coming and trying to get as much as they can because they understand it's going to run out. They're going to have to go back to going for scraps. Now, if you tell these same people, there's free bread forever, at first, people are going to storm it, right?
Right.
Because, for one, they're not going to buy that. Free bread forever? No, come on. So they're going to storm it. After a while, they start seeing, for one, the bread's now getting moldy inside their kitchen because they grabbed way more than they could ever eat. Maybe they had some parties, and then after a while, you're going to start realizing, it's still available. It's still there. I don't need to go and storm the castle to get bread anymore. And people would stop doing that.
No, it's true.
Or if capitalism still existed, while one program is offering free bread, then you're going to have people getting all the bread and extorting others to sell them the bread, because that's what capitalism does. So anyway, I want to read you the article. It's a short article, and it's from a place called returntoorder.org. That sounds very ominous to me. I don't like the sound of that.
Return to order. That sounds really hardcore Nazi. Like, I expect Darth Maul or I don't know, Joseph Goebbels or some combination thereof. Order? Yeah.
Hitler coming back as a pug. He's probably
I'm got serious. So you're gonna read me some fascist propaganda, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. No.
Can I just say really quick though that there's this cat named Pyotr Kropotkin who literally wrote a book about this. It's called The Conquest of Bread. I think he wrote it about Panera.
His name was Peter, guys.
I don't know who that is. I don't know who that guy is.
Okay. It says on my book. So that's a good day, sir. So look, I wish you could have some kind of text right here while I'm reading that if anybody's joining up and watching right at the time this happens, or for some reason steps into a room while somebody else is watching it and this is all they hear, there's a text that says, "This is not what the Phoph believes." Okay? So if you can make that happen, make it happen. Anyway, this is it. This is how Panera found out that socialism does not work. Okay, ready?
Wow. That's the headline.
Yeah. Okay, I brought the news that Panera has closed its last Pay What You Want restaurant. Located in Boston, the bold experiment ended on February 15th, 2019. The Panera Cares chain once operated 5 restaurants, one each in Boston, Chicago, Dearborn, Portland, Oregon, and St. Louis, Missouri. It was the brainchild of Panera founder Ron Shayach. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. In a recorded talk, he explained that the concept arose after he and one of his children volunteered at a food bank. That evening, he decided to devise a far more efficient way to make quality food available to those suffering from food insecurity. Mr. Shayach has a long record of success in food preparation before founding Panera Bread. He owned the bakery chain Au Bon Pain, which operates in 29 states. Blah, blah, blah. Talks about the history of he became successful with Panera, right? both of his companies operate on a similar premise that people wanted high-quality baked goods and were willing to pay a premium price for them. The two chains were so similar in their concept that recently they merged and now offer similar menus. The basic idea behind Panera Cares was simple. The restaurants would serve food similar to the fare at other Panera locations. However, patrons would only pay as much as they thought themselves able to pay. In this way, Panera would be able to provide food security on a small scale to the needy.
Can I just say, I got to
Not
say,
a horrible idea.
not socialism. Socialism is not, that's capitalism. That's, a reduction in price or pay what you want still allows capitalism to be the order of the day. There's nothing even remotely socialist about that. If anything, it's fascist. I mean, that's a stretch. I don't want to call the owner of Panera a fascist. Sounds like he was trying to do a genuinely cool thing. But this notion of a nanny state, socialists constantly get accused by dishonest characters like Rand Paul and stuff about how, we just want the state to run everything and redistribution of wealth and all that. That's not socialism. Having someone come along and go, look, I still get to be in charge of everything and I get to own all the resources, but I'm going to give you a break. That is not socialism. Yeah. So just on the outset, I just want to state, none of that, what Panera did, is socialist. Now, it might be a good thing. It might be a bad thing, but it's not socialist. Go ahead, guys.
Well, yeah, and I feel like not a horrible idea.
Right.
Just as a way of offering food to people that might not be able to afford, to eat that well. Not a horrible thing.
Right.
But I agree with you, not an example of socialism. And one of the biggest reasons for me why it's not an example of socialism is because socialism and capitalism cannot coexist. Not true socialism. So now he says socialism on a small scale. That's the next part of it.
Oh, God.
In 1875, Karl Marx penned his most famous line, from each according to his ability to each according to his need. Right? The idea was not original, but his precise wording is seared into the consciousness of every socialist and pseudo-socialist in the world. And, yeah, okay. Are you trying to insult me? So, goes on. It sounds so good. It is so logical, and yet so altruistic. It goes well with other platitudes like the wealthiest nation in the world ought to be able to feed its people.
That's a platitude?
Almost hear an elevator music version of John Lennon's Imagine playing in the background.
Oh, my God. Fuck off.
Right. Now, this is where, it gets to the meat of what this is all about. Intentionally or not, Panera Cares tested Marx's premise.
No, it didn't.
Mr. Shea believes that those who were able would happily pay something extra to provide food for those who could not afford to pay the full price. He also believed that those who could not afford the full price would pay what they could. Unfortunately, Mr. Shades' faith in the premise proved overly optimistic. Eater Detroit, I guess it's some magazine or some kind of food thing, describes Panera Care's short history. The restaurants weren't financially viable.
Right. It was a failure of capitalism. It was like...
That's not it. Yeah. That was one of the things where it just proves what you were saying and what I wanted to say before you got there first. This is not a study in why socialism would fail or succeed. This is just another example of capitalism failing the people.
Right. Like capitalism tried for a second to do something cool, and it couldn't. Because check it out, guys. I want to say this, and I'll let you get back to it. But the reason it is not indicative of from each according to their ability to each according to their need is because the Panera has much more. They have more than their need. They're hoarding beyond their need. Okay? Each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Not one group gets to have a whole bunch and then decide how much you need.
Right.
Not an example of from each according to their ability to each according to their need, not an example of socialism. Go ahead, guys.
Right. So, again, the restaurants weren't financially viable, Panera Cares was reportedly only recouping between 60 and 70% of its total costs. The losses were attributed to students who mobbed the restaurant and ate without paying, as well as homeless patrons who visited the restaurant for every meal of the week.
Good for them.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Students who are overloaded in debt because they're students, how dare they mob that place for food? The homeless people, now they got to eat meals all week? The nerve of some people, right? In 2017, Panera was sold to a conglomerate. Mr. Sheikh left the company the following year. The new owners pulled the plug on Panera Cares. On February 15th, the lights went out. Now it's got a byline, socialism always fails.
Oh, God.
Socialism eats away at the vitals of once healthy economies, but be they large or small. The same human and economic forces that ate away the altruism of Panera Cares has consumed Venezuela.
Oh, my God.
Which, again, Venezuela, from what I can see, is another example of how capitalism failed a
Western imperialist capitalists.
country.
Western imperialist capitalists have made a concerted, violent, destructive effort to exploit the resources of Venezuela. There's been more than one CIA-backed coup attempt in Venezuela, and I'll just say this is to all the Vuvuzuela fucking paranoia. I remember hearing a piece of shit right-winger talk about, they're eating out of trash cans in Venezuela. And while I was listening to that, I literally looked to my right out my car door and saw a person eating out of a dumpster right here in Reno, Nevada. So, again, they're not... I love how they say that, socialism fails or whatever. They give no specific example. And they can say Vuvuzuela because that's a dog whistle to everyone that watches Fox News or Newsmax or Breitbart or in your fucking far-right fascist Reddit threads. You just say Venezuela and that's the perfect example of socialism failing. None of them can tell you specifically how it was socialist and specifically why the socialism failed. They point to a lot of stuff that more often than not isn't even true. Like they're eating rats in Venezuela. That was just not a thing that happened, and they have never provided a specific example of that. But they still repeated it over and over and over again so that they can go, again, Venezuela. That's all they have to do is say Venezuela, and then all these, brainwashed people go, oh, yeah, see, yeah, knew it. Ha, 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 stupid socialists.
Right. Now, it's my understanding that one of the biggest problems with issues going in Venezuela is a direct result of capitalism, having been that the oil prices, the price for oil, which is Venezuela's largest export,
right.
the price of oil dropped substantially. And because you're trying to coexist with capitalism, now all of a sudden there is a huge drop in the money available in Venezuela. That's not socialism causing the problem. That's capitalism causing the problem.
And all that the leadership and has done, what the people of Venezuela have tried to do is nationalize the resource of the oil and let the people of Venezuela get the benefit of that. And because they tried to do that, we've sent death squads in there and fucking tried to overthrow their government because basically a handful of Western fucking imperialist CEOs are the ones who believe themselves entitled to those profits. Meanwhile, Venezuelans suffer when they're they're one of the primary exporters of oil. They should be fabulously, not wealthy, but very well taken care of, considering how much of a valuable resource oil is. But none of the people that live there are reaping any of the rewards of that resource. People that look like me and you, white presenting fucking capitalists, are the ones reaping the rewards. And none of that, all of that is a stark, deep condemnation of capitalism. and in no way whatsoever an example of socialism. So Venezuela has really, really tried to eke out versions of socialism and has been stomped hard every time they tried.
Yeah.
It's gross.
Well, I will say, cuz that if there are other people out in the world who look like me, they've got a lot of other problems.
A lot of
they
other
got bigger problems.
Deep issues. I mean,
yeah,
you're astoundingly ugly, cuz. I mean, I love you. You're my family, and I would do anything for you. But, like, I don't see how the walls in your house don't melt with that level of ugly.
Well, you know what? I've got earbuds in. I don't know if anybody can see it. These aren't so that I can hear you talking. It's just to keep things from crawling out. And I don't ever lift my hat. You don't want to know what's going on under there. Yeah. You ever done those wake up in the middle of the night in a full body shiver kind of thing?
It's my cousin's noggin. Yeah. That you just dreamed about my cousin's noggin. That's what that was. That's why you woke up.
By the way, this amazing hat right here was given to me by my cousin, Reverend Aaron. Amazing. This is my favorite hat that I wear pretty much all the time. And what happened was we were camping one year and he saw my head. Please, dear God, put something on. Here, this is my favorite hat, but just take it and cover that. And I did, and it's worked out well.
And it's my job to keep you in badass scally caps and anarchist books.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go and anyway, look, the Panera Bread thing. All it does is it has a little short paragraph about see socialism is dumb. It does claim that most people who make an effort towards socialism always end up going to the right because they end up seeing the frailty and the faults in socialism.
Nope.
Give me a break. Again, to me, you can't run experiments like this. It's the same as experiments that people want to send me videos of experiments done in the 60s on mice where they were giving everything they needed. And then the mice were discontented and started acting out and fighting with each other. Okay, for one, I'm not a fucking mouse. I'm sorry. I'm not a mouse. You give me everything I need, I'm not going to go and punch my neighbor. That's just not going to happen.
Now, if you're starving, and your neighbor has a loaf of bread, you might be a little more inclined to go punch him.
I'm taking that motherfucker out. So, anyway, sorry. People constantly want to try to give these examples of why socialism wouldn't fail. And the thing that sucks the most is people buy it. They don't understand the concept, and I really do believe this. One, if socialism is going to succeed, it has to succeed globally. Capitalism needs to be wiped out completely. Okay, let's say there are some small places that want to still try to hold on to it. Okay, you're going to end up losing out. I don't understand why the vast majority of billions of people on the planet can't just simply stand up and say, you know what, you ain't kicking me out of my home. And yeah, we're doing this. The people being exploited, the people who are impoverished, the people slaving away to earn profit for somebody else, vastly outweigh the amount of people who are reaping the profit.
That's right.
And once these people start really understanding the grasp of that and start realizing, I don't have to kill myself or others to have a good life. If we could simply stand up and plan it and say, nope, we had enough, we're done. But until we get to a point to where we're ready to go and really wipe out capitalism, I think it's going to be a hard sell. I think it's going to be hard to make that work. And I think that socialism and capitalism just cannot coexist. You cannot run an experiment on socialism trying to get people to see it when they know, even subconsciously, they have to resort back to capitalism afterwards, after the experiment's over. It's already doomed to fail.
And I will say this, and then maybe we'll get into wrapping it up to bounce, jump off of what you're saying, is that every actual, real socialist experiment, which the Panera Bread example is not an example of socialist experiment, but every legitimate social experiment, from the second it begins its project, is under intense attack and scrutiny from the capitalists. Okay?
Yeah.
And it has to put all of its resources into destroying that, because socialism then makes it impossible for that small handful of people to then exploit the rest of humanity. And that small handful of people is going to do everything it can to be able to continue to exploit the rest of us. And its greatest tool is to force us into train us to be ignorant and divided. You know, and I do want to say, I want to reiterate one more time that the Panera example is a glaring example of how destructive and deadly and heartless capitalism really is. A capitalist tried in some small way to be helpful to other people, and it failed miserably. And so what did it do? It went back to its age-old way of exploiting its workers and subjecting them to wage slavery, and continues on as a successful business.
Who did it point out as the villains in this example? Students? Homeless people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are the villains in this world? People who found an opportunity to have food and took advantage of that?
It's disgusting. It's disgusting, isn't it? They subjugate us. They force us into poverty and often starvation. And then when we try to break out of that in any way, we're stomped on and blamed for that poverty and that, desperation. So disgusting. Yeah. It's the same thing as, blaming the woman for being raped, for saying, she should have wore a different outfit that day. It's the same thing as acting like George Floyd, because he was accused of passing a counterfeit $20 bill. He should have thought of that and expected that cop to fucking murder him. And somehow it's his fault, You
should definitely blame the starving for eating. Yeah. People that are starving, people that are hungry. And you're making it sound like a shameful act that they took advantage of the opportunity to eat. That's what it does. And volunteer at a soup kitchen. Man, I'm all for that. But still strive for a world where we don't need soup kitchens anymore.
Word. Malatesta talked about that a lot, about keeping the immediate, when you have the long-term and the immediate have to be working in concert with each other. You can't just address each individual. You should address each individual thing that happens, in your daily life, but make sure the way you tackle it doesn't depart from, or more importantly, hinder the long-term project, right? And that's much easier said than done, guys. There's a lot of debate that goes on and discussion that goes on. It's like about whether or not our immediate actions, maybe they help us in the short term, but are they hurting us in the long term? And these are discussions we have to continuously be engaged in, right? I really love, what a cool actual show that we started out talking about the conquest of bread and then ended on the need for a literal conquest of bread company.
I'm going to lie and say that I planned that intentionally.
Well, listen, you're incredibly hard to look at. You are the epitome of everything ugly and disgusting, but I love you to death. And I really appreciate these conversations. I'm really enjoying this each week.
I do too.
But before we get out, I should probably say much love, thanks, and appreciation to everyone at Punks for Progress. Much love, thanks, and appreciation to you for watching. And as I said earlier, and as I always say, much love, thanks, and appreciation to literally anyone and everyone who does what they can, when they can, to get up and out in an effort to make life better for other people, because it matters makes a difference. And unless you got any other final thoughts, cuz I think we'll just get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, no, I need to smoke.
Cool. Go inhale your capitalist death.
Look, I think this was a great conversation. I'm so glad we're doing this. I'm just looking forward to figuring out what it is we talk about next week. And for those of you who are watching, comment. Let me know how dumb I am. Please, I'd love any kind of any words or feedback from people. I just had a good time, man.
Cool. Love you, cuz. Hey.
Love you too, cuz.
Check out this live Real Mackenzie's video. And we'll see you next time on New Leftist Questions with the Phoph. Love you, cuz.
Come on, let's go. Just get your hands together. Hey, 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 hey. Boys, everyone. Whoosha. Circle around the bar, right on the crowd around the strand. I walk in a bunch of building on the river town. When the thing was hard, I walked the devil appeared from hell. He had a roll of come out, and about the pearl, devil had on his hip, and his hand down the road. You also have to take this round, and now it's in your soul. Shift the price of right, and the right screw hits. Not the money of heaven, power, but you will choose it. That's bigger! Change your walk, he got rid of the rot. There wouldn't be a problem with the soul of all of us. But the devil hold no tie, no matter how hard he tried. I want to attack the warrior, she lives to all the eye. Change the soul of the river, I think my heart said it now. All the sheep around the river, down the river town. He slowly lost his mind, he lost his family. He lost his job and had to join the King's Navy. Fire! I say to me, come out and I will catch you, ship. I'll let him know again. I gotta build a ship. I say to me, come out, I'm gonna get you. Yes, I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. Come on, my friends. Let me hear ya. You in the back, it's okay. Let's have a good time. Well, the rest chase ship up the gang, back up the ship. They picked him in the church and came into the family flip. He was swimming to the captain, the turn about the ring. The captain spied the madness, they shot him in the ring. Then we had his man, doing his right to do. He came out the latch to the bank, saying true. The water was standing and he said, lying down. She was such upon the water, the last guys around. Fire! I say to you, but I shall have a dance to ship. I'll never go to pit. I'll never build a ship. I say to you, but I shall have a dance to ship. I'll never go to pit. I'll never build a ship. I say to you, but I shall have a dance to